The story of Easter. Easter is celebrated by Christians as the religious holiday remembering the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God, who healed the sick and made the blind to see. The Christians remember the miracles Jesus performed, like feeding the thousands of people with just a few loaves of bread and fish. Easter is the end of the Lenten season, a 40-day period of fasting, prayer and penitence. The last week of Lent is called the Holy Week. Holy Week begins with the observance of Palm Sunday. It commemorates Jesus' humble entry into Jerusalem to observe Passover. According to the Gospel account, he was greeted by crowds of people who spread their cloaks and laid palm leaves in his path and proclaimed him the Son of David. In many Christian churches, Palm Sunday is celebrated with a blessing and procession of palms. Maundy Thursday commemorates the Last Supper. The Last Supper is the final meal that Jesus shared with his apostles in Jerusalem before his crucifixion. During the meal, Jesus predicted his betrayal by one of the disciples present, and said that Peter would deny knowing him later that day. During the meal, Jesus takes bread, he thanked God for the bread and shared it with the disciples and said, "Take this and eat it. This is my body which is given for you." Then he took a full cup, thanked God for it and said, "This is my blood, which will be poured out for many people so their sins may be forgiven." They all took a sip from the cup. After some time, Jesus got up from the table and went to a different part of the room. He took off his everyday clothes and put a large towel around himself to look like a servant. After that, he poured water into a large bowl and began to wash the disciples' feet, then dried them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." When Jesus had finished washing all of the disciples' feet, he returned to the table. Jesus said, "You call me teacher, and that is who I am. And now that I have washed your feet, you can also wash one another's feet. This is an example of how you should treat others." When they had finished supper, they went to a place called the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus asked his disciples to wait while he went to pray. Jesus asked God if it is possible for him to not have to go through what is coming. But Jesus would do what God wanted. Jesus was so upset, an angel came to give him strength. Jesus came back to his disciples. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of Jesus' disciples, was coming towards them. He was followed by a large crowd of people who were carrying swords and clubs. Judas walked right up to Jesus and gave him a kiss on the cheek. This was a sign to the chief priests that this was Jesus, and that he was the man that they wanted to arrest. Jesus let them take him. The disciples did not know what to do. They were afraid that they might be arrested for being with Jesus. They quickly retreated, leaving Jesus to be arrested alone. Peter was the only disciple that followed Jesus. He was careful to follow at a distance because he was afraid. He wanted to see what would happen to Jesus. Peter was just outside where they had taken Jesus. A servant girl saw Peter and had recognized him and asked, "Weren't you with that man named Jesus?" But Peter lied and denied knowing Jesus. After a while, more people asked Peter the same thing. Peter continued to deny knowing Jesus. Right after Peter said this, a rooster crowed, and Peter remembered something Jesus had said to him, "Before the rooster crows, you will turn your back on me 3 times." When Peter remembered this, he was very sad. Peter was one of Jesus' closest friends, and now he had lied and said he didn't even know him. On Good Friday, Christians commemorate the crucifixion and death of Jesus. It commemorates Jesus' suffering and death on the cross. Good Friday is a day of sorrow, penance, and fasting. On Friday morning, Jesus was taken to Pontius Pilate. He told the Jewish authorities to sentence Jesus according to their laws, but they could not sentence him to death. Pilate and King Herod of Galilee, neither of whom thought Jesus should be sentenced to death, said that Jesus should be whipped and released. Pilate asked the crowd what they would have him do with Jesus, and they demanded, "Crucify him." The governor had Jesus flogged and then brought him out to the crowd to release him. Then Pilate handed Jesus over to be crucified in order to stop a riot and to keep his job. A crown of thorns was placed on Jesus' head, then he was whipped and bound to a wooden cross. Jesus then had to carry his cross to the site of execution. He was helped by Simon of Cyrene. There, he was crucified along with two criminals. Crucifixion was a common punishment of the day. He was alive on the cross for 6 hours, and for the last 3, darkness is said to have fallen across the land. Jesus, despairing, asked, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Before his death he cried, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." A soldier pierced the side of Jesus with a lance, causing blood and water to flow out, and the centurion informed Pilate that Jesus was dead. 2 Jewish members made arrangements to take Jesus' body, embalm it in spices and wrap it for burial. Jesus' body was wrapped in a clean linen shroud and placed it in his own new tomb that had been carved in the rock in a garden near the site of crucifixion. Myrrh and aloes were placed in the linen with the body, in keeping with Jewish burial customs. The 2 Jews rolled a large rock over the entrance of the tomb. Then they returned home and rested, because Shabbat had begun at sunset. On Easter Sunday, there had been guards watching the tomb so no one would steal Jesus' body. When they saw the angel, they fell over and they couldn't move or speak because they were so afraid. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know you are looking for Jesus who has died. But he isn't here, he has risen just as he said he would. Come and see for yourself, the tomb is empty." The women were confused. How could this happen? They were sure Jesus had died, and now he was alive? They looked in the tomb and the cloths Jesus had been wrapped in were lying on the ground. The tomb was empty. Jesus rose from the dead on the 3rd day after he was crucified on the cross. Christ rose from the dead and, in doing so, proved that he is the Son of God. There are many traditions associated with Easter. In olden times, Christian monks were very good at explaining their religion to those who hadn't heard of God or Jesus. They almost always took symbols of significance of the people they were teaching and used those symbols to teach about God. The timing of Easter was such that it coincided with the spring festivals of many pagan religions. These spring festivals celebrated the awakening of the world after spring. This awakening went very well with teaching of Jesus' resurrection. The ideas of the rebirth of spring were merged with the Christian teachings of Jesus' resurrection to form the Easter holiday most of us know today. One of the highlights of the Easter season for children is scavenging for colored eggs, painted with bright colors to represent the sunlight of the spring. Easter is one of the most important celebrations in the Christian calendar. It is a holiday that celebrates the resurrection of Jesus. After his crucifixion, death, and burial, 3 days later, he arose from the grave. In doing so, he conquered death and redeemed Christians from sin. Easter coincides with springtime in most parts of the world. Resurrection has to do with a new life. Happy Easter Sunday.